Hey folks, Will Owen here with JetBoatPilot.com. On today's video, we're doing an updated thrust vector installation for 2021 boats. Actually, for 2021 year model for thrust vector. This is going to fit all Yamaha boats from 1998 up through the current model year. All twins, all singles, regardless if you have an articulating keel, not 275s, 255s, even exciters. There is a possibility some of the old school exciters like 1996, 1997 that may not work out. Just give us a call and we'll chat with you about that. But for the most part, every Yamaha boat ever made, this is going to be a universal install. So really simple, straightforward. For twin engine boats, it's going to be the same install as it is for singles. So just follow this protocol regardless if you have a twin or single engine boat. Before we get started and going too far here, make sure you turn off your battery switches. Make sure that your lanyard is pulled. Just for safety reasons, to make sure that you don't have anybody in there messing around with the boat, starting it up while you're back here working. So always good to be safe. Before we get started, let's talk about some tools that you're going to need for your install. Right away, we recommend a ratchet. We recommend a 9mm, 10mm, 11mm, and 12mm socket. Also, a 10mm wrench and an 11mm wrench is also helpful. If you have it, a tap. This is a M8 by 1.25 tap, and if you have this, this is recommended for cleaning up the threads on the nozzle prior to installing your new bolts. Some may not need this. The threads may be just fine, but we found that sometimes from the factory, the technician would add a little bit of extra kind of heavy-duty Loctite when mounting these pivot bolts here, and in doing so, it can make it difficult to add the new bolts to the system. So just FYI. Also, some have asked, can you do this with just like a regular something handheld? And that's also possible. We like to use the drill because we've done it a bunch of times, but if you're not sure how to use this, maybe consult a few videos on YouTube how to properly use a tap, and that'll maybe save you some trouble in case you are concerned about messing up your threads on your nozzle. If you do mess up your threads, don't worry. We are here to help. We can answer some questions about how to do that, but for the most part, this is not hard to do. Follow the steps, you'll be fine. Let's do the unboxing real quick. So we have our thrust vector box here. Inside, you're going to notice you're going to get a little swag, a little sticker. Depending on when you watch this video, you might even get a little fancy boat float here. We've had those we've been giving away for a little while now. You're going to get your hardware pack. I've already kind of split this one open here so I can show you some of the contents, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. You're going to get an actuator. This is ×2 on a twin engine. We'll set this aside for the moment. I'll put this over here. You're going to get some fins. Should be packaged in plastic. These are not today for me, but they'll normally come in plastic wrap. One stack is going to have 3 fins, a standard right and left plus a cutaway. Other side's going to have a left and a right. We'll set the left one and the right one aside for now. We'll do that portion of the install later. Today, because we're installing on a new 255 FSH and we have the articulating keel, we're going to select the cutaway fin and the right side fin. If you were installing on a boat that did not have the articulating keel, you would obviously select the full size left side fin and set aside the cutaway fin. So we won't use that today. I'll set that aside. Let's talk about hardware. So in this kit here, everything is kind of packaged all in little pockets to help us with quality control, to make sure your kit has the proper parts. I've already kind of cut the top off of this one to get everything out of here easily, and I'll go over each of those pockets with you. This first section here is the anode relocate bracket hardware. This little rod on the end here is a cross tie. That's going to give us stability and kind of lock the whole system together, kind of like a box when we get done. It gives it stability. This next package here is going to be our blue Loctite as well as Allen wrenches. Next is going to be the left side bolt assembly. Notice it does not have the spring. On the opposite side of the packaging here, we have a right side bolt assembly, and now it does have the spring, and that's the only difference between it and the left side, is that it has the spring attached. So otherwise they are the same. Put this out here. We're going to have 2 5/8 long 1032 screws for our cross tie. We're going to have 4 of the 1032 by 5/16 screws, and this is to connect the actuator to the fin. We'll put these here. And then on the end here, we've got our revised kickstand, which is really the reason for this video today, is to ensure that the revision is illustrated properly, how to do the revision. So as we get into this video today, you'll learn what changes were made and why we made those changes. It comes with a small little 3/32 Allen wrench as well. All right, the rest of the parts in the kit should be, oh, there's one more. There is a steering clevis bolt, brand new with a brand new lock, nylock, so we'll set that out here. The rest of these parts are duplicates of the first that we've already talked about, so we'll set that aside for finishing up on our second nozzle. All right, let's get started. First things first, if you'll bring the camera around to the left-hand side, we're going to choose our 10mm Allen wrench, or excuse me, 10mm socket, and we're going to take off the anode. The anode on this side here is held in place by 2 bolts with a 10mm head, and to get these off, this should be pretty straightforward considering this is a new boat. These should back off really easily with no corrosion issues, etc. Now, if you've got an older boat, something that's had an anode here for a while, especially for you saltwater boaters, these bolts could be in bad condition. We'll take this and set it aside. We won't reuse that. There's a possibility these bolts might be in bad shape and be difficult to remove, so take your time with them. If the bolt head for some reason were to snap off, don't be alarmed. You can still get them off. What we've learned is because the anode is, the hole in the anode is just kind of a through hole, that you're able to knock the anode off using a little bit of either pressure or a hammer or whatever. You can slide that anode off if there's a stud that's kind of sticking out but the head's broken off. If you notice how it just kind of passes through like this and there's lots of slop there, if it's stuck on there and the head snapped off, it's really just a bunch of corrosion holding it in place. You can hammer that off, pull the anode off, and there'll be a couple of studs left behind. Grab some vice grips, twist those studs off, clear the threads, and then you can reuse the hardware we're providing. You may also at that point want to replace this anode because it is something that's a serviceable item. Probably should be replaced when it starts deteriorating away. So this is an aluminum material made for kind of a combination freshwater, saltwater use. Yamaha does that because these boats go in a variety of different environments. All right, so now we've got the anode off. We're going to put on the anode relocate bracket. Bracket looks like this. We're going to put it on the back side where you see these extrusions here. Some boats or some of the older anodes are not going to have these extrusions, and we'll talk about that in a second here. You're going to have a bolt looks like this here with a washer and a lock washer and a nylock. We're going to take those all apart. We're going to put the washer and the bolt through the front side of the anode like this. It's going to pass through. On the back side, since we have this little extrusion here, we're just going to use the nylock, and we're going to just put that on finger tight. Take our second bolt here. We're going to do the same thing. Just leaving that locking washer aside. We're not going to use that on this particular anode because it is the extrusion type. Pass it through. Put on our nylock here. If you have an older style anode that does not have these extrusions on the back, we use these extra washers here to give us some additional thickness or to simulate additional thickness on the anode. That way it kind of shortens the bolts a bit so we don't have issues with the bolt touching down on the side of the nozzle. So just FYI, that's what that's for. All right, now as we get ready to tighten this, what I like to do, I like to take the 5mm Allen wrench and place it on the front like this, and then on the back side, as I hold this thing, I'll hold it with my hand kind of like this, pressing the bracket away from as I'm tightening, and it's a 10mm. We're going to just kind of press it away as we're tightening, and it hasn't got to be super tight, just snug's fine. We just want to make double sure we give ourselves plenty of clearance when that next bolt kind of passes through that hole there. All right, same thing, we're going to flip our anode over, put the 5mm in place, press this bracket away, same thing, tighten it down. Sometimes it's hard to show this for the camera to see as well as for me to do the work. That's your assembled anode relocate bracket ready to go on the boat. Now, next step, we've got a little bolt here and a washer. We're going to take our blue Loctite that comes with the kit. I would recommend stirring this up before you use it, just to make sure you've got good locking power. Twist the cap off. We're going to put, where's my Allen? Here we go. We're going to put this bolt on the end of the Allen wrench, and we're going to put a good healthy coat of Loctite right on top there. Now, one of the things I like to stress is that when you're doing this Loctite step, it's important to be liberal with the Loctite, because the Loctite not only is going to hold this anode bracket in place, but it's also going to serve as a corrosion inhibitor, so that when we put this in place, the stainless bolt doesn't have an issue corroding itself to this aluminum housing here. So, and before I do this, because I'm on the right side, I'm going to just do this by hand. We'll go ahead and put our bolt up in place here and kind of just work this in by hand. On boats like this, it can be kind of difficult to get that wrench all the way in. It's kind of tight there, so we'll start it by fingers here, and then we'll tighten it in just a moment. All right, repeating the same steps. I like to use the Allen wrench because it keeps it steady for me as I'm applying the Loctite. Liberal amounts of Loctite. It's also good to have a rag with you on this install, so if you didn't see that in my preface there, go ahead and get you a rag handy. Just be cautious if you are using this Allen wrench that you can possibly scratch the gel coat. I'm just thinking it's going to be too close, so I'm going to do it by hand. Get this thing started, and then as we've gotten it started, come back with our Allen wrench. We'll tighten it down, and it just has to be kind of cinched down snug. You haven't got to over tighten this or anything. Be careful, those are aluminum threads you're dealing with there, so not too tight. The Loctite is going to hold it in place securely. All right. You'll notice on this newer style kits, there's a stainless steel and a Relocate bracket. We upgraded that to stainless steel just for additional strength over time. A little quality improvement there. All right. So anode Relocate kit is in place, and the bracket is moved forward. We do this because as the fins turn hard over, when you have the fins installed, the fins can touch the anode. So moving them forward like this obviously eliminates that obstruction. All right, next step. Take off our 10 millimeter, find our 12. We're going to take off the left side pivot bolt here. This is going to be Loctited in place with kind of a stiff Loctite, so I'm going to have to break that loose. And once we pull this out, you're going to notice we've got a bolt, we have a washer, and we have a spacer. And this factory bolt washer spacer combo here will not be reused. We'll just set it aside. I do want to point out, when I get it off though, what I was mentioning. See this little orange substance here? So that's that factory Loctite we were talking about. And if you want to be cautious, and if you don't have a tap, just take out the bolt that we send you and go ahead and stick that in the nozzle and try to thread that all the way through ahead of time. It's just a matter of grabbing an Allen wrench and twisting it in. I want to see if that bolt is going to go all the way in, you know. If it goes all the way in, where I can pass it through all that residual Loctite and all the way through, even into the inside of the nozzle, like this one, it's doing just fine. It's not having any obstruction. I feel like I can install that bolt no problem. So I don't need to tap this side. If you do that test and you find that it's difficult to get that bolt in place, then we're going to use the tap. Now, because many of you watching this video have never even heard of a tap before, I want to kind of go through that step to make this a little bit less of a foreign language to you. A tap is basically a tool they use to cut threads. This one is an M8 metric 8 millimeter for that hole size, and it's a 1.25 thread. So we're going to take the tap. If we need to tap this, take the tip here. We're going to find the hole center, and we're going to start to rotate that into the threads by hand manually. I can't stress this enough. Start it manually, and as you're working it, just make sure that it goes in 3 or 4 full threads. You know, you want to make sure that you are rotating it, and even grab the threads with a rag and get yourself some bite and twist it until you know that you have a lot of threads inside the nozzle. You don't want to start this thing with the drill if it's not threaded several turns into the nozzle. All right, so once we've done that and we feel like we've got it threaded in, you'll then take your side drill here and I'll just tighten it down. And then really slow, I'm gonna turn it so you can see, really slow, we'll take it and we'll just kind of rotate. Now, I don't know if you can see it with the camera. I'm gonna try to show you with the camera. Inside, there is a hole that comes from the outside, and I'm gonna try to pass that thread or that tap all the way through until you see it come through on the back side. You probably can see it in just a second here. There it is. See it peeking out? Now we know the tap's gone all the way through. We'll back it out. Just have a little pressure on it as it comes out. And that is how you're going to properly tap that thread if it's boogered up with a lot of residual Loctite. Now, you're going to probably have some residue sitting right here on this ledge. So what I'll do is close my eyes, blow that out, and make sure I don't have a lot of powder waiting for me to put the next thing in. You know, you make sure that it's clear of any kind of debris. It may have some metal chips, it may have some residual Loctite. All that's fine. You're not going to enlarge the hole. It's just going to clear out any debris when you use that tap. So same protocol will be used for each of these 4 holes if you're in need. So bear that in mind. Okay, so selecting our fin. Now that we've got that tap cleared out, we're going to choose the cutaway fin because we're using a articulated keel version of this boat here today. And we're going to grab that bolt assembly that we took apart just a moment ago. Long bolt, washer, stainless steel sleeve, like this. We're going to pass that through the outside. See how there's no pocket? The pocket's on the inside. Pass it through the outside. We're going to put on this 3/4 inch long spacer. This spacer is 3/4 long on these newer versions. Some of the older ones might have a 5/8 spacer, but this newer one's going to have a 3/4. Now that we've got it in place, we're going to take some blue Loctite. We're going to put this in, and again, being liberal with it, I want to spin it over and make sure every thread has a nice, healthy coat. This keeps it locked in place, as well as prevents corrosion. All right, get this in place here. We're going to thread it on. Really critical part of this installation is to see this stainless steel sleeve. You want it to pass through the reverse bucket. Some older boats have aluminum reverse buckets. These newer boats have these plastic reverse buckets, but they're all the same as far as their function. We just want to make sure we jiggle the reverse bucket as we tighten so that stainless sleeve passes through the reverse bucket and touches down on the side of the nozzle. When we're done here, you're going to notice on this boat, because it's a black plastic reverse bucket, that our span between the fin and the reverse bucket is relatively tight. It's going to freely move like this and probably about a 1/16 of an inch of play. On an older nozzle, let's say it's like a 1998 through 2011 model, they'll have an aluminum reverse gate with a very thin pivot point. You're going to see more play or slop in that particular installation. Not to worry, it's no big deal. It's just there to kind of make sure that this fin stays outboard versus moving inboard. So not a huge deal if you got a little extra play there. But anyway, so we're going to cinch this down, make sure it's tight, give it a little snug. This is aluminum, so as you tighten these threads, you want to make sure that you're not over torquing them, and that's why we give you a short little Allen wrench so you can't do a lot of damage. All right, moving to the opposite side. Going to use our 12mm socket. Going to break loose this factory bolt here. Probably is easier to do this with a 3/8 drive, a bit longer ratchet, but I like to keep these install videos simple with as few tools as possible, so I use the 1/4 inch drive and muscle up on it. We'll pull this bolt completely out. Once again, same thing, it's the full bolt, washer and spacer that gets pulled out. We are not going to reuse that bolt. Now, on this side, because we have the steering arm, we're going to take in our 11mm socket here, along with an 11mm wrench. We're going to remove this bolt here for the steering cable clevis. This is done for 2 reasons. First, mainly because we want to make it easy to put the spring kind of around the steering arm. But secondly, we want to reposition this bolt to where it is upside down. That way, if the mechanics that are working on your boat from time to time need to do something back here, they don't have to remove the thrust vectors to do their job. If the bolt were in place, it can make it difficult to get the nozzle off or impeller maintenance or whatever else might be going on. So anyway, we'll take that bolt and all that off. You don't reuse that bolt. We're going to supply a new bolt, and that's going to come with your kit. It's going to look like this. It's got a new nylock, so that new nylock is going to work well. You don't want to reuse a nylock if you can help it. If you have to reuse a nylock, we recommend putting Loctite on it, but we're going to give you a brand new nylock to put on at the end of this process. All right, we're going to take the steering cable clevis off, and we're going to take the two little nylon bushings off. We will reuse these, so I'll set these aside for now. And I like to take the other nozzle, and as I pull on it, notice how it kind of takes the cable and pulls it away. It just kind of gets it out of the way. For those of you with drive-equipped boats, you probably won't be able to do that, but if you've got a standard cable-driven boat, that's actually easy to do and just makes it easier to work back here. All right, we're going to take our right side bolt assembly, same thing as before. We're going to take it apart. We're going to put this bolt through the nozzle, and we're going to make sure that it goes all the way in. And if it does go all the way in, we don't need to tap it. If it doesn't, if it feels like it's going to bind up on us, because that particular day at the factory, the guy that was installing this just felt really Loctite happy, then we would have to go back through and clear this out. But I can feel it passing through the Loctite now, but it's not giving me any trouble. So it should be fine. I'm going to go all the way in, though, just to make 100% sure. You'll feel it bottom out. It'll actually stop against the side of the nozzle when you get all the way in. And once you get that, there it is. I'll back it back out. So again, not going to need to tap on this side here. That's good. Most of the time it's not necessary, but I have seen occasions where it was. That's why I like to have the tap handy if I got it. If you don't have the tap handy, what I just did here also works. You just have to work it in and out a couple of times with this bolt. The bolt can serve as a tap of sorts. Just have to work it in and out a few times to free up any of that residual Loctite. So once again, checking the pivot point, make sure there's no debris. We're good there. All right. Now let's, before we put this next fin on, I want to show you the revision. Thrust vectors being released June 1st. Moving forward, get a kickstand that has a revision to it. The kickstand body is the same. The hardware essentially is the same, but with one difference. We are now, instead of doing a press-in threaded fastener, we're doing a through bolt, which actually makes the product more durable and the installation process easier, the assembly process easier. So we're going to assemble your kickstand to your fin now. Kickstand, for those of you that are unaware, it's a simple device that allows you to prop the fins up while you're anchored in shallow water. So what we've got right now is the fin itself, along with the little sleeve here. I've got the sleeve already pressed in. I like to actually press that sleeve out before I start this process, just so I can kind of show you, if yours comes disassembled, how it's done. So first things first, we'll take from the outside, take the bolt. This should be a 1-inch long bolt. It's going to pass through this hole here, pass it all the way through like this. Okay. Next step, we're going to take our spring. Got a little small stainless steel spring. It's got a short leg with a bend. It's going to go in this little hole right here. If you can see that little tiny hole. All right, we're going to pass that little spring leg into the hole. And once we've got that there, we're going to take the little aluminum sleeve here. It's going to pass over and sit on like that. Next, we're going to take the body. We're going to press the body. It's got a little line there in the side. It's going to align itself with the spring arm. We're going to take the whole assembly and press it around, and it's going to seat itself up against the body like that. Okay. Now, with the little locking nut that comes with it, this is a nylock nut. This is a 9mm head, and we're going to hold that in place. And we're going to take our 9mm socket, and we will tighten this down. Now, one thing to note, when we're tightening this down here, see how I'm holding my Allen wrench here? We want to make sure that we don't over tighten. If we over tighten, what will happen is it will compress this kickstand to the side of the fin. And see how when I tighten it, how I flop the fin and it doesn't want to come back? So I've got it too tight. What I'll do is I'll put my Allen wrench back in, back this thing up about a turn, And now it has good action. So you want it to snap back like that. That way the auto retract feature works. If you've got it too tight and it's not coming back, it won't function properly when you're using the boat. All right, now that that's done, we can move on to the installation. We'll take our right side bolt assembly. Conventionally, we have offered, up until now, a bolt, a washer, a long sleeve, and then a nylon sleeve plus a spring. And that's been our common way to install this stack. Now what we've done is we've basically shortened our stainless steel sleeve to allow the use of the factory sleeve, and we're introducing a washer in between. So let me show you how this assembles for the rest, so you can complete the rest of your installation. What you'll do is you'll take your long bolt. On the right side here, it's a 55 millimeter. Should be a 55 millimeter on the left. However, if you receive a 50 millimeter, it's totally fine. But for right sides, it definitely needs to be the 55 millimeter long. We assemble the washer first, then the 1-inch long sleeve. We then pass that bolt, sleeve, and washer through the fin. We're then going to put on the nylon protective sleeve here, followed by the spring. It's going to go through the hole all the way through. See how it passes out the other side there? That's important to make sure it passes all the way through. Once we have that, we're going to put the next washer on. This is going to isolate the spring from the reverse bucket, so there's no chance of the spring applying any kind of load to the reverse bucket. And finally, we're going to put the factory bushing back on. Now this, if you don't have this bushing, it's going to come with your kit. But if you do have your factory bushing and you want to reuse it, it's the same dimensions. We'll put that on. All right, now our stack is complete. It's time to install. What we'll do is we'll put on our Loctite. As in previous portions of this video, it's really critical to install this bolt with lots of Loctite. Be liberal with that. Just want to make sure this bolt doesn't back itself out, as well as we want to make sure that we have a corrosion inhibitor here so we don't have dissimilar metal corrosion. All right. Now, this part of the video is particularly important so that you get this on without having issues struggling with the spring. What I want to do is I want to thread the bolt into this right side of the nozzle here, just about 2 or 3 turns. Well, maybe 2 or 3 threads. What we're going to do is we're going to thread it in by hand, give it a couple of turns, make sure that bushing there is going into the nozzle, so we're not going to be binding on the reverse bucket. Once we've got it in, we're going to take the palm of our hand, press it up against this head of this bolt here, and as I'm putting pressure against that, I'm going to take the bottom edge of the fin, I'm going to pull out, and I'm going to rotate the fin all the way around, if you can see this, all the way around the front side of that steering arm. Now that I've got it forward of the steering arm, I'm going to take the spring, pass it around. So now it's on the front side. Now while I'm still holding pressure against that bolt, I'm going to grab the bottom edge of the fin. In reverse, I'm going to come back around the edge of the steering arm. I'm going to keep pressure on the bottom edge of the fin while I let go. I'm going to now take the bolt with the 5 millimeter Allen wrench. I'm going to tighten this until it bottoms out. What we want to do is we want to compress those stainless steel sleeves up against those washers. If you've done this right, the washer will not spin. If the washer still free spins when you turn it with your hand, you don't have it completely tightened down properly. As we mentioned before on the previous step, if you feel like you need to tap this thread here, you can do that. However, it's not always necessary, but refer back to that previous portion of the video if you do think that you need to tap. All right, so now that we've tightened it down, we want to give it a snug. This is an aluminum nozzle, so you don't want to over torque this. Just make sure it's snug. The Loctite is going to secure this into place. It's not going to back itself off. What I want to point out now is that we have this washer in place that is isolating the spring away from the reverse bucket. So regardless of what steering angle you have, regardless of what's going on, the spring just cannot apply any load to the reverse bucket. One final step you want to do before we move to the next step, just double check your reverse bucket, make sure it has freedom of motion, make sure there's no binding. Obviously make sure your fin is moving freely and we have spring tension. And once all that's done, we can now move forward to our next step. All right, now let's put our steering cable back together. We're going to take our nozzle on the opposite side and push it away, and that's going to bring the cable back to us. We're going to put our nylon bushings back in place. They're going to go on the top and the bottom edge of the steering arm. Once those are in place, we're going to now take our clevis and then we're going to slide that clevis over. Sometimes those clevises have been crushed over the years. People have over tightened these bolts and crushed them. So if you find that's the case for yours, you can just simply span that out a little bit to make it less of a tendency to pinch. You don't want it pinching. You want it free, kind of like an axle or a hinge. You know, it's just there to help you move that cable in and out. You don't want it pinching or binding. All right, we're going to put this nut on top here. Now, going back on, we're going to use a 10 millimeter, and we're going to use a 10 millimeter wrench instead of the 11 that we used taking it off. Don't ask me why we did that, but we did. Putting our wrench in place, we're going to tighten this until we start seeing threads sticking out the top. Now, what I want you to notice, and bring the camera in real tight, we want the thread coming through the nut, but then at the top, we want to make sure that we've only got about maybe 1 or 2 threads sticking out, and there's a reason for that. I'll show you as soon as I've got it tight. There we go. See how the thread there sticks out? When I pull this fin up and it rotates, if you put too many more threads through, it can potentially rub on the fin. So we've got plenty of engagement in the nylon. It's a brand new nut, so we know it's not coming off. So anyway, just want to make sure I point that out. All right, next, final steps. Now we're going to install the actuator to finish things up. The way I like to do this to make things easy, I'll grab one of the little 5/16 screws. I'll put it on the end of an 1/8 inch Allen wrench. We'll give it a little dab of Loctite. Even though these bolts already have a little bit of thread locker already on them, I like to add Loctite just as a precaution. We'll slide the pressed in fasteners into these little receptacles here. And by the way, those are powder coated. There's a possibility you might have some excess powder coat in those holes. If you do have excess powder coat there, just a simple little scrape with a pocket knife or even running the screw through a couple times will clear that. Just don't fret if you do have trouble getting that bolt started. It's just kind of the nature of adding powder coat. All right, so we're going to slide this into the pocket. It's going to index itself. And on the outside here, we're going to add this first screw. And I've found that it's much easier to start this screw if you've got it attached to the end of a wrench like this. Just makes it simpler to get it started and to make those first few turns. We're going to tighten this all the way down, and we'll do this on both sides. Also be cautious. What I just did just now could have scratched the fin. You don't want to get in a hurry here. Take your time, because this fin can break loose and then could scratch up the side of your pretty new fin. All right, repeating that step. 5/16, a little bit of Loctite. Not as important here to put as much Loctite on it because this is stainless going into stainless, but we still do like to put some on there. Also, I just noticed that when I put this screw in, it went in pretty easy. That means the patch lock was a little bit thin. That means it was a really smart thing to use Loctite on this screw, because had I not, that patch lock may not have completely done its job. We could lose a screw. So nylock on this step, or excuse me, Loctite on this step is a good idea. All right, put a little bit more Loctite here. Bring this over, line this up. And we're going to go into the top spot here. So much easier when you've got this connected to the end of a wrench. Can't stress that enough, because it's a tiny little screw and using it with your hands. See, again, the patch on this was very thin, so not really doing a lot. We did this patch locks as a redundancy in case people forgot to put on their Loctite, and it usually works pretty well. It's usually very thick, but as with all things, there are variances. And apparently that particular day when the guy was running the machine, he didn't go as heavy as maybe previous batches. So this Loctite step is definitely recommended in this step. All right, so we're going to tighten this down. All right, almost done. Got our screws in place now. We're going to grab our cross tie and 2 5/16, or excuse me, 2 5/8 1032s. We're going to put a dab of Loctite on the end. We're going to pass it through this hole right here. It's going to pass all the way through onto the inside. And then we're going to take our cross tie and we're going to thread it into that screw there. Get that side started there. Kind of a tight space to work. Opposite side, pass it through on the outside. Gonna make sure it passes all the way through the cross member of the actuator and into the tip here. Now, just want to kind of start this by hand, make sure it's not cross-threading. And then once you feel like you've got it started well, you'd have 2 Allen wrenches, both of them 1/8. You'll connect it to each 5/6 or 5/8 screw. We'll turn one while the other one holds stationary. And we're just going to tighten it until we get it fully seated on both sides. Once you feel like it's not turning on one side, you can go to the other. And we'll cinch it down, just firm. What we want to do is we want to make sure we pull that up tight. That locks it all together and makes it into a box, but we don't want to over tighten because you can pull the head of that bolt right through that fin. And people have asked the question before, why do we use plastic? Polymer fins. This is a UHMW. It's a very high quality marine rated polymer, and it's designed specifically to take an impact. So if you were to hit something, you don't transfer loads into the more expensive components. And we don't have a problem replacing these because they're easier to build than aluminum. So anyway, just FYI, that's the reason we've chosen it. It's actually a superior product to aluminum in this application. So, all right, one more check. We're going to check the reverse bucket. It's moving, it's pivoting freely. The fins are moving and pivoting freely. Our kickstand is working. It's snapping back and it's propping in place like it's supposed to. It's retracting if we pick up on the fins. Everything is moving freely. There's no binding. And that is a complete install for this side. Now, obviously, twin engine boats, you'd repeat these steps over on the port side. Single engine guys, you're good to go. You're done. Probably going to take you 30 minutes aside if you're doing this, you know, the right way. For any questions at all related to thrust vectors, you can find us at jetboatpilot.com. Obviously, you can reach out to us anytime through the Contact Us page. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook. You can find us on YouTube. Pretty much any of the social platforms these days, we try to be on there as much as possible to be available to you. If you want to reach out to us by phone, give us a call. Any questions at all during the installation process, we're always here to help. And yeah, we really appreciate you watching this video today. We hope it was helpful to you, and hope you have a great day. Thanks.